And the legendary, iconic founder of the Elgins, founder of the Temptations, the one and only Otis Williams.
Otis Williams is finally speaking up. After decades of silence, the founding member of the Temptations is ready to reveal the truth he's kept hidden for years. While the world saw the hits, the fame, and the flawless performances, Otis carried something much heavier behind the scenes. Why now? And what secret was so big it stayed buried through breakups, reunions, and the loss of his closest brothers? Join us as we uncover the truth Otis Williams is finally ready to share. From Texarkana to Detroit. Otis Williams, born Otis Miles Jr. on October 30, 1941, came into the world in Texarkana, Texas. His early life was shaped by a mix of challenge and deep cultural roots. Otis was born to Otis Miles and Hazel Louise Williams, but his parents separated not long after he was born. His mother moved to Detroit in search of work and a better life, leaving Otis in the care of his grandparents in Texas. This was common during that time, especially for black families in the South trying to find new opportunities in the North. While he was still young, Otis eventually joined his mother in Detroit, a move that would shape the rest of his life. Growing up in mid-century America as a young black boy wasn't easy. There were deep divisions in society, and racism was something Otis saw and felt from an early age. Still, even during these hard times, Otis found comfort in music. He was especially drawn to gospel music, which he first heard in church. He began singing in local groups as a teenager and quickly realized he had a strong passion for performing. When he began taking music more seriously, Otis made the decision to use his mother's maiden name, Williams, as his stage name. This was a meaningful choice. In a way, it showed his desire to start something new for himself. He wasn't just trying to be another kid from a struggling family. He wanted to create his own path. Choosing the name Otis Williams was a quiet but clear step in claiming his own identity in a world that often tried to define young black men before they could define themselves. Moving to Detroit opened up a whole new world for Otis. At that time, Detroit was booming with opportunity. It was known as the Motor City because of its strong car industry, but it was also becoming a center for black culture and music. Many families had moved from the South to cities like Detroit during what's known as the Great Migration. They came looking for jobs, but they also brought with them rich traditions, new ideas, and a hunger to succeed. For Otis, this environment helped him grow. Detroit wasn't perfect. There was still racism and struggle, but it was also full of life, community, and music. Being in Detroit placed Otis in the perfect spot to meet other young men who loved music as much as he did. It was a city where dreams could be built if you were willing to work hard and stay focused. The people he met, the sounds he heard, and the energy of the city all pushed him forward. Detroit gave Otis not just a home but a stage. And that stage was only the beginning, because the next part of Otis's journey was meeting the men who would help change music forever. The Temptations. Before the world knew the Temptations, Otis Williams was already making waves in the Detroit music scene. He had started a group called Otis Williams and the Distance, which quickly gained local attention. They were a mix of raw talent and ambition, with a sound that stood out in a city overflowing with musical energy. The group even scored a regional hit, which helped build their reputation. But even though they had some early success, things behind the scenes weren't perfect. There were issues with management, and one of their songs was sold without their permission. That experience left Otis and his bandmates frustrated and ready for a change. That change came in the most unexpected way, during a performance at St. Stephen's Community Center in Detroit. The group was part of a local event with several acts performing, including the Miracles, who had just tasted their first big success. That night, something special happened. Otis and his group gave a performance that truly stood out, catching the attention of a man in the audience who would go on to change their lives, Berry Gordy. Gordy, the founder of what would become Motown Records, was impressed. After the show, he approached Otis with a simple offer. If they were ever looking for something bigger, they should give him a call. That moment set the stage for what was coming next. At the same time, two other young singers, Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams, formerly of a group called the Primes, were also in search of a new direction. Otis, always thinking about the next step, saw the opportunity to bring all their talents together. They joined forces with Melvin Franklin, whose deep voice would become a signature part of their sound. With a few more lineup changes, the group finally took on the name The Temptations. Once under the Motown label, the group's world changed. They were surrounded by legends like Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, and the Supremes. But it wasn't easy. They trained hard, long rehearsals, perfecting their dance moves, getting their harmonies just right. Motown was more than just a label. It was a machine that polished talent until it shined. The Temptations were about to shine brighter than most, but even as their fame grew, they couldn't escape the harsh realities of the world they lived in. One powerful example was a show in Columbia, South Carolina. When they walked onto the stage, they saw the audience divided by a rope, black people on one side, white people on the other. It was a painful reminder that the country was still deeply divided. But the Temptations performed anyway. Their music didn't know color. They sang with heart. And for a moment, everyone in that room was united by the sound. Hits, hustle, and harmonies. When the Temptations began working with Smokey Robinson, their careers took a huge turn. Smokey wasn't just a songwriter. He was a visionary. He saw something special in the group and helped shape their sound into something unforgettable. One of the first big songs he gave them was The Way You Do the Things You Do. It was catchy, fun, and gave the group their first national hit. But it was My Girl that truly changed everything. That song, with David Ruffin's smooth lead and heartfelt lyrics, became an anthem for a generation. It wasn't just a hit, it was history in the making. What made the Temptations stand out was more than just their songs. It was their entire presence. Each member brought something different to the group. They had falsettos and deep baritones, and when those voices came together, it created a beautiful harmony that fans had never heard before. Add in their sharp suits, choreographed moves, and cool confidence, and you had a group that people couldn't stop watching. They didn't just sing, they performed. Every show was polished, and every step on stage felt like it had a purpose. That level of professionalism made them icons. As music changed, so did the Temptations. They didn't stick to just love songs. When producer Norman Whitfield started working with them, the group took a bold step into something new. The music became more experimental and powerful. Songs like Cloud 9 and Ball of Confusion tackled real issues. They were no longer just singing about romance, they were singing about life, struggles, and society. This shift into what became known as psychedelic soul wasn't just creative, it was brave. During the 1960s and 70s, the Temptations were more than just a musical act. They became symbols of pride and power for the Black community. They showed that success was possible even when the odds were against you. Their music gave people hope, and their style gave people confidence. In a time of marches, protests, and deep cultural shifts, the Temptations were part of the soundtrack of a movement. Loss of son, brother, and friend. For Otis Williams, success in music was never separate from pain. Even while living a life that many would dream of, touring the world, winning awards, and performing timeless hits, Otis faced deep personal loss that never really left him. One of the most heartbreaking moments of his life came in 1985, when his only son, Otis Lamont Miles, died in a construction accident. Lamont was just 23 years old when he fell from a building he was working on. It was sudden and tragic, the kind of loss no parent can ever fully prepare for. For Otis, it was a wound that cut deeper than anything fame or music could heal. Even though he was in the public eye, Otis didn't often speak about the details of his grief. But those close to him knew how much it affected him. Lamont wasn't just his son. He was his pride, his joy, and the hope of his future. After Lamont's death, Otis still went on stage, still sang the songs that had made his group famous, but now with a different weight behind every word. It wasn't just performance anymore. It was healing. Music became both a job and a way to hold himself together when everything inside was falling apart. But Lamont's passing wasn't the first or only time Otis had to face heartbreak. Years earlier, in 1973, his longtime friend and fellow original Temptation, Paul Williams, died by suicide. Paul had been struggling with health issues and depression, and although he left the group before his death, the bond between him and Otis never faded. They had started this journey together, sharing dreams, disappointments, and brotherhood. Losing Paul was like losing a piece of the group's soul and a piece of Otis's own heart. The pain of that loss didn't go away, even as the group moved forward with new members and new music. Then, in 1995, Melvin Franklin passed away. Melvin had been the bass voice of the group and one of Otis's closest companions. He was known for his deep voice and kind spirit, and he and Otis had stayed side by side longer than almost anyone else. Melvin's death felt like the closing of another chapter in the original Temptations story. For Otis, it was another friend, another brother, gone too soon. And still, the shows continued. The songs kept being sung, because that's what Otis believed in, honoring the legacy, no matter how heavy the burden. Otis has often said that what keeps him going is the love for the music and the responsibility to preserve what they built together. He knows that every audience member who shows up for a Temptations concert is also showing up to feel that connection to the songs, to the era, and to the men who made it all possible. And Otis, even with the pain he carries, keeps showing up too. The cost of devotion. Otis Williams has spent most of his life on stage, traveling the world and helping shape the sound of a generation. But behind the spotlight, his personal life has had its share of love, heartbreak, and difficult choices. Fame brought him admiration and opportunity, but it also tested his relationships in ways that many people never have to face. While Otis gave much of himself to music, it often came at the cost of personal connection. His first marriage was to Josephine Rogers, a relationship that began before the full rise of the Temptations. They married in 1961, during a time when Otis was still grinding through rehearsals, chasing record deals, and working hard to get noticed. Their son, Otis Lamont Miles, was born that same year. For a short time, it looked like Otis might be able to balance a growing family with his career. But as the group's fame took off, the pressure of being gone for long periods, constantly touring, and living in the public eye became too much. The demands of being a husband and father clashed with the intense schedule of a rising Motown star. Otis and Josephine eventually divorced, and their relationship became one of many that couldn't survive the cost of fame. Not long after, Otis experienced what he once described as a deep, passionate connection with someone equally iconic, Patti LaBelle. Their romance captured a lot of attention, and for a while, it seemed like it might lead to a lasting partnership. Otis even proposed to her, but Patti turned down the proposal. She later said she wasn't ready to give up her own career or settle into the role of a traditional wife, especially during a time when women in the industry were fighting to be seen and heard in their own right. Their love was real, but their lives were moving in different directions. In the end, both Otis and Patti knew they couldn't make it work. It was a heartbreaking decision, but one that showed the difficulty of balancing two strong ambitions under one roof. In the years that followed, Otis married again, first to Ann Kane, who had worked as a wardrobe stylist for the Supremes. That relationship brought some comfort and steadiness for a time, but like before, the pressures of life in the spotlight made it hard to hold on to. Otis's later marriage to Otis Williams also had its moments of peace, but it too came with challenges. These were relationships filled with real emotion, commitment, and effort. But Otis's devotion to the legacy of the Temptations often had to come first. He was carrying not just his own dream, but the memory of his friends and the expectations of fans who had followed them for decades. Throughout these ups and downs, Otis remained a father figure in more ways than one. While he had lost his son Lamont, he still had family to lean on, including his stepdaughter, Elon Carter. Elon, the daughter of Ann Kane, had her own brush with fame when she became a cast member on the reality TV show The Real Housewives of Atlanta. Though she lived a different kind of public life, her connection to Otis gave her a unique perspective on celebrity, legacy, and music. While Otis never sought the limelight in the same way reality stars do, his quiet support of Elon showed another side of him, a caring man who, despite everything, still believed in family. Still, Otis never gave up on love completely. Even after multiple marriages and many heartbreaks, he remained open to connection. He believed that love, real love, was worth chasing, even if it didn't always work out the way he hoped. And through it all, he never lost sight of the music, the friendships, or the memories that shaped his life. Cracks in the foundation. The 1970s brought a tough stretch for the Temptations. After years of topping the charts and filling concert halls, the group began to face real challenges. Music was changing fast. The smooth Motown sound that once ruled the airwaves was giving way to new styles. Funk, disco, and hard rock were on the rise, and fans, especially younger ones, were shifting their attention. For a group that had once been at the center of popular music, staying relevant became harder with each passing year. Inside the group, things weren't much easier. After so many years of touring, recording, and dealing with fame, the members were feeling burned out. Success came with a heavy price: long nights, personal sacrifices, and non-stop pressure. Some members were ready to move on, while others struggled with health issues or personal problems. The unity that once held them together began to show cracks. Even with their talent and experience, it was becoming clear that the group couldn't just keep doing things the way they always had. To try and adjust, the Temptations looked toward a new sound. They experimented with what's known as Philly soul, a smoother, more orchestral style of soul music coming out of Philadelphia. It was rich, emotional, and popular at the time, especially with groups like the O'Jays and Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. The Temptations released songs with this influence, hoping to tap into the moment and reconnect with their audience. At the same time, Motown itself was changing. The company that had built the Temptations into stars was moving operations from Detroit to Los Angeles. The family feel that once defined the label was giving way to a more corporate environment. The support system the group had counted on in the early years didn't feel the same. There were fewer hands-on producers like Smokey Robinson or Norman Whitfield guiding the process. As Motown changed, the Temptations were left to figure out how to survive in a music industry that didn't always have space for older acts. And just when things seemed like they might never bounce back, something unexpected gave the Temptations a second wind. More on that coming next. Making a comeback. The 1980s marked a surprising and powerful comeback for the Temptations. After the struggles of the 1970s, many people had begun to wonder if the group's best days were behind them. But Otis Williams never gave up on the group. He stayed focused and kept pushing forward even as the music world kept changing, and his dedication paid off. With the help of some smart collaborations and a renewed creative spark, the Temptations found their way back into the spotlight. One of the first big steps in their revival came with the help of Rick James. In 1982, the group teamed up with him on a track called "Standing on the Top." It blended Rick James's funky, modern sound with the Temptations' classic harmonies. It was different from what they had done in the past, but it worked. The song charted, fans noticed, and the Temptations were back in the conversation. It showed that even in a new musical era, their talent still connected. That same year, something even more powerful happened. The Temptations reunited with David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks for the Motown 25th Anniversary Special. It was a major television event, watched by millions across the country. When the group hit the stage, they brought all the energy, charisma, and soul that had made them legends. The performance reminded people just how influential they were. It also introduced them to a new generation who had never seen the original lineup in action. From there, the Temptations kept the momentum going. In 1984, they released "Treat Her Like a Lady," a song co-written by group member Allie Woodson. It became a hit and proved that the Temptations weren't just living off their past. They were still making great music. The track had energy, emotion, and style. It landed on the charts and became a fan favorite, especially among younger listeners who may have only known the group by name. As the years went on, the Temptations found ways to stay relevant. They worked with younger artists, appeared on television, and kept touring across the country and overseas. While the lineup continued to change, Otis Williams remained at the center. He wasn't the lead singer, but he was the one guiding the ship. His vision and loyalty to the group's history helped make sure the Temptations stayed more than just a memory. He kept their music alive and their story growing. The secret finally revealed. For a long time, Otis Williams didn't talk much about the struggles he faced behind the scenes. He stayed quiet while dealing with problems that could have easily ended the Temptations. But in time, he opened up, not just about one moment, but about everything it took to keep the group going. As the Temptations rose to the top, so did the pressures. Each member brought something unique to the group. But those differences often led to strong opinions about how things should be done. Arguments about money, creative control, and recognition started to build, especially between Otis and lead singers like David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks. Both were talented, passionate artists, but they also wanted more say in the group's direction. They didn't always agree with Otis or with how decisions were being made behind the scenes. Eddie Kendricks had his share of disagreements with Otis. Kendricks began to feel that the group's music was losing its original soul, especially as they moved into more experimental sounds in the early 1970s. He was also concerned about finances and felt that certain decisions were being made without the full input of all members. At one point, Kendricks even pushed the idea of going on strike to demand more control. Eventually, he decided to leave the group to start a solo career. Though his departure was emotional, it was not entirely surprising given the growing divide. Paul Williams, Otis's longtime friend and one of the founding members, faced his own inner battles. While he didn't clash as openly as Ruffin or Kendricks, Paul struggled with health issues and personal hardships that affected his ability to perform. Otis tried to support him as best he could, even arranging for Paul to remain on the payroll and involved behind the scenes when he could no longer take the stage. Despite these efforts, Paul's life ended in tragedy, something that deeply affected Otis for the rest of his life. When David Ruffin joined the Temptations in 1964, everything changed. His voice was powerful, raw, and full of emotion. He didn't just sing the songs, he made people feel them. His lead vocals on tracks like My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and I Wish It Would Rain helped take the group to another level. Fans connected deeply to his soulful delivery, and his stage presence was impossible to ignore. For a while, it felt like David was the missing piece that pushed the Temptations from great to legendary. But as the group's fame grew, so did David's ego. He knew he was talented, and he wanted everyone else to know it too. He started demanding more recognition, more money, and even more spotlight. At one point, David insisted that the group be renamed David Ruffin and the Temptations. To him, he was the reason for their success. To Otis Williams and the other members, this went against everything the group stood for. The Temptations were built on teamwork and harmony, not just in music, but in spirit. Otis tried to reason with David, but things only got worse. Ruffin's behavior started changing. He showed up late to rehearsals, missed important shows, and sometimes wouldn't show up at all. Rumors about his drug use became harder to ignore. Cocaine and other substances began to take over his life, and it affected everyone around him. The group couldn't rely on him anymore. Even though he could still deliver magic on stage, the chaos behind the scenes became too much to manage. For Otis, the breaking point came when it was clear that David wasn't going to change. As the unofficial leader of the Temptations, Otis had the difficult job of protecting the group's future. After many warnings and second chances, the group made the hard decision to fire David in 1968. It wasn't an easy call, especially for Otis, who had believed in David's talent from the start, but the group couldn't afford to be dragged down, no matter how gifted someone was. Even after he was removed, David wasn't ready to let go. In the months that followed, he would show up uninvited to performances and even try to take the microphone mid-show. Security sometimes had to escort him out. It was dramatic and sad to watch. He also took legal action, trying to regain his place in the group or receive financial compensation. These battles made things harder for everyone, especially Otis, who had to keep the group moving forward while also dealing with the emotional toll of losing someone who had once been like a brother. Over the years, David continued to reach out. He would sometimes ask to come back to the Temptations. There were moments when it looked like a reunion could happen, but each time, something would go wrong. The trust just wasn't there anymore. Otis wanted to believe in David, but the damage had been done too many times. Still, Otis never denied David's talent or his impact on the group. He always acknowledged that David had been a huge part of their success. Privately, the situation hurt Otis deeply. He had seen David go from a bright star to someone fighting his own demons. Otis wasn't just a bandmate. He had tried to be a friend, a support system, and a steady voice through the chaos. But sometimes, even the strongest support isn't enough to stop someone from going down a dangerous path. David's struggles were personal, but they affected everyone around him. David Ruffin passed away in 1991, and his death hit Otis hard. Despite everything, the arguments, the courtrooms, the heartbreak, Otis always held a certain respect for what David brought to the group. His voice, his style, and his passion had all helped shape the Temptations. Losing him was like losing a piece of the group's soul. It was also a reminder of how fame, pressure, and personal pain could collide in painful ways. For Otis, dealing with David Ruffin was one of the most difficult chapters in his journey with the Temptations. It tested his patience, his leadership, and his heart. But through it all, he kept going, holding on to the group's legacy while carrying the memories of the people who helped build it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more exclusive stories like this.